This is the SprayTracker. In this configuration, the flow sensor is on the outside, and it's going to be used for inline spraying with a pistol sprayer. So the general description of this is that you have a control box, which is the yellow portion. You've got a water filter, a flow sensor, and you connect it to have the water come in through the filter and then out through this end. You can always check that by looking on the side of this flow sensor. You can see that it's very faint, an arrow that shows the direction of flow. Other things to note, this is a 150 micron filter. It needs to be at least this or better. If you don't want to use this one, you have to at least have that much filtration beforehand. This flow sensor is very precise, and because of that is very sensitive to any type of sand and dirt inside the water. On the side is the serial number and barcode for the SprayTracker. So this is a 3/8 inch hose. So when you open the system up, this is what you'll see. You've got the GPS. You've got a very important note on here that this end here needs to be pointed toward the sky. So on a pistol mount, this would be connected up here, and so it'd be hanging down. You always want this end facing the sky. This is the memory card. So to hold the data, batteries. The only switch in this whole thing is right here. It's the on-off switch. And then you have 3 different LEDs. We'll go over these LEDs a little bit later on exactly what they do. So there's also a little note in here. You want to make sure you read any of these notes, that you want to have the system turned off before you change the memory card or change the batteries. Also, for this specific system, the system itself is rated for 200 psi, but this specific flow filter I have is only rated for 100 psi. So the system as is rated for 100 psi. If you take this off and use something else, the overall system can get up to about 200 psi. So you insert the batteries, and the system comes alive. Now before we talk about the operation, this is a waterproof design, but in general it should never be left out in the elements. As much as possible should be put as protected as possible. Same thing with the plastic housing. It is a rugged housing, but if it is smashed around, banged around, just like anything, eventually it will break. This hose has a stainless spring in the inside, so that keeps these clamps from crushing the pipe. It gives quite a lot of strength lengthwise, but if this is put in line, again, you wouldn't want to yank on the hose from this end if you were having this on a 50-foot spool or something and have all the load pass through the whole system. In general, you'd want to grab the hose before the SprayTracker to pull it. Now there's some other little tricks you could do if that becomes a problem, where you can actually put a cable between the end beforehand and the back, have it clamped, and take up the slack a little bit. That way if anybody pulls on it, all the tension passes through this cable instead of the unit itself. The most of all the calibration on this for battery detection is all really designed around the Energizer rechargeables. In reality, if you want the best battery life out of it, you want to use In-Loop Pro batteries. These are basically the best you can buy right now as it comes down to rechargeables. But these you can really only get on Amazon. The Energizer rechargeable are ones that you can buy at essentially any CVS, any Walmart, anywhere. And so, because they're so common, these are the ones that everything's kind of based around. And these are the ones that will be coming with the system. Alright, so to actually power this up and the modes of operation. So, when this turns on, the first thing you'll see is this light turn on. Now, there are 3 different lights, and the actual descriptions are given here in small print, but if you got good eyes, you can at least read them. You have the GPS light, you have the status light, then you have the battery light. So, when the system turns on the first time, this battery light will either go red to tell you that the batteries you installed are not fully charged. And if it turns green, it tells you that the batteries you just installed are fully charged. Now, if it turns red, it does not mean the batteries are bad or won't last a very long time. It simply means that they're not fully charged. That way it gives you an idea. This has about an 8-hour life with these rechargeable batteries. Like for this one, these are batteries directly out of the charger. Turn them on, it'll turn green. That way when you start the day out, it gives you an idea of, hey, these are fresh batteries. If it turns red, it tells you, you know what, you don't really know. You could have almost 7 hours of spraying battery life, or maybe you only have 2. So that is the battery indicator. So the next thing is that if you don't have your memory card installed, the status light will turn white. And it'll stay white until the memory card is installed. Then it'll go through its sequence. So, the GPS light on the top. When the GPS light is solid red, it means that it does not have a GPS lock. Once it actually has a GPS lock, then it will start blinking green. And we'll let a moment to see if it'll get a lock. This is indoors, so it usually takes a few seconds. So from a GPS lock perspective, if you're outside, it usually takes less than 30 seconds to create a lock. So there, we're inside with a metal roof, and it was able to get that in about 20 seconds. Now, something you can notice is that if I turn this off, turn it back on, it nearly finds that lock instantaneously. And so what that's doing is the GPS itself is actually remembering the last place it was at, and it remembers what satellites were in the sky. So when it turns back on, it goes back to its original program and says, hey, are those GPS's satellites still in the same location? So they'll check, and if they are, they'll get an immediate lock. Again, on the GPS, you want to make sure, in general, that you have a clear sky, a view of the sky. You don't have to. This is done huge amounts of testing in woods, in heavy canopy. It'll work fine there. You will get a little bit more variance depending on big trees you might go by. But if you're in an open field, it's good to about plus or minus about 10 feet in a clear field, and then kind of varies from there. So that's also with you have buildings, any large buildings that you could be very, very close to. You can get reflections depending on if you're in the shadow of one of the satellites. In general, you only have about 4 satellites in view at any time. So if you're next to a building, you might be blocking off 2 of them, and you have to have 3 satellites for a location. One of them, the 3rd satellite, might be a reflection off another building. So just things to keep in mind. And that's true for any GPS, no matter what its accuracy. So then what this is showing now is that the battery is now blinking green. So the blinking green tells you have good battery life. When this battery starts to go blinking red, it means that it's getting low battery, meaning that you have about maybe an hour and a half left. This does vary on temperature and type of battery. And then when this goes to a solid red, it tells you that the battery, you probably only have about 30 minutes left on battery life. So the status is basically an indicator to let you know when there is flow going through. When it goes blue, that tells you there's flow. It also will let you know if you're overflowing the system. So these flow sensors have a specific flow range that they can handle. If they go beyond that range, it can damage it. So this will start to go red if you go beyond that flow rate. So that's the basics of the system and how it's run. So now you basically close it back up, snap it back in, and again, this is what it'll look like from the outside. It's what it looks like when it's actually water going through it. Now, this system will now just run autonomously. It doesn't need anything else until the end of the day when you turn it off and take off the memory card. So what this is now going to be doing is that this one is set so that it's recording all the flow that's going through this system. And what it does is that every 3 seconds it says, was there any flow in the past 3 seconds? If there was, then it records that. If there was no flow, it doesn't record it. So that way, this is not going to fill up the memory card with all the locations you were at but did not flow. That is an option, but it does start to create a lot of data points. So what it's doing is that every 3 seconds, it takes a value. But it's a little bit smarter than that. What it's doing is that if you only actually sprayed for 2 seconds out of the 3, it takes the GPS location of those 2 seconds and averages them. Same thing, if you only sprayed for 1 second out of that 3-second recording period, it only takes the GPS location of just the period of which you actually sprayed, and gives you that average. It has a lot of other filters built into it to keep any misreadings to happen. This is something that we found, that when these systems were running in the back of a truck, just the driving along, the sloshing motion, the flow sensor was accurate enough and precise enough to actually detect that slight sloshing of the water in the line, and was giving a lot of misreadings. And so there's algorithms in here that filters that out to make sure that it only is recording true flows. So at the end of the day, you open it up, you turn it off, and you remove the memory card. When the file pops up, you'll see it basically contains 2 files. One of which is a CSV file, which is essentially an Excel document, and the other is a KML file. This KML file is a native Google Earth. Before we open them, I want to talk about the naming convention. So this is the naming convention for the files that are created on the SprayTracker. The file is based on the first 2 digits is the month, second 2 digits is the day, then a 1 digit for the last digit of the year, and then the last 3 digits of the serial number. This basically creates a unique file name that won't repeat unless you're spraying for over 10 years. So this allows you to not take files off the memory card if you don't want, and it'll simply create a new file every single day, and that allows you to find those files easily. So when a file is created, everything sprayed on that day goes into this file. You can turn the SprayTracker off, turn it back on, doesn't matter. It's going to check to see is there a file name already created, and if there is, it'll simply add to the existing file, and if there's not, it'll create a new one. So for jobs, it depends on how you want to use it. Sometimes it might be easier to have multiple memory cards and you put a new memory card in for each different job, and that way the file is already kind of separated by jobs. Or you could simply just let everything record onto one file and then separate the data from there. So if we go in and just open up the Excel document, this is the raw data that is going to be on the SprayTracker. The first column is the latitude, then you have the longitude, then you have the flow. Now this flow is in gallons. So as we talked about previously, it's recording in a 3-second increment. So this is telling you how much fluid to pass through the flow sensor in that 3-second period. And this is the average location over that 3-second period, or at least over the period that it was being sprayed during that 3-second period. You then have the day, time, and serial number of the SprayTracker. Now, day and time. The day and time is Eastern Standard Time with no daylight savings. So that is the best way to understand it, and you just have to remember that when looking at specific times. Now, one of the ways that we found people that use this is that they will separate jobs by time. The time on your phone is basically updated from satellites and towers and is very accurate. This is all GPS time, which is very, very accurate. Which means that if you have multiple jobs during a day, you could simply just keep a notebook of saying that at this time of day, I started this job, at this time I ended it. So when you're looking through this data, it's very easy to switch through the time, and a lot of times you'll see big time gaps. And so you can just select a certain amount of time and know this is all associated with that one job. So some easy things you can do here is, you can select that whole area there, and then in Excel down here in the bottom left corner, you can see it gives the sum. Like for here, it sprayed 1.0009 gallons. So basically exactly 1 gallon was sprayed. And so this basically gives you raw data. Now this data can be imported into basically any other program you want, ArcGIS, ArcMaps, other Google Earth formats. This can be basically imported, manipulated, in any type of data analysis you want. The other file is a native Google Earth file. Now when you just open that up, it simply immediately comes in and it will give you that visualization of where that data is. Now, Google Earth does not allow you to do nice things like lasso around a certain data points here and have it automatically tell you how much chemical by adding up all the little dots. Now, there are programs that can do that. ArcMap's example of those. They get more expensive. But if you just want quick visualization, this is what this can do for you. It also, you can click on a point and it gives you the amount of gallons that was put down at that point. You can also then layer these. If you have multiple people using SprayTrackers, you can add multiple layers to have everybody's data for a whole job put onto one document, and either this file can be given to a customer or just screenshots given.